Welcome to another edition of the Daily Night. My name is Brian Smith, and I am your host for this show. And I'm also the publisher at Inside the Nights on Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated. Just got back from Atlanta, the Under Armour event, where several players that UCF has offered and or entertaining offering a scholarship to. And I want to talk a little bit about them and a little preliminary on some of the scholarship offer situation as we head into spring practice. So it's kind of a culmination of things. It's nothing one area is going to do. It's got to be quite a few to try to get this into perspective. Every coaching staff wants to have an idea of numbers that they're going to have at each position going into recruiting. But part of that is spring practice. It's kind of the middle point where things can change. So I wanted to have a little bit of a number point based on what is coming into spring. And then I'll probably do something like this again after spring, because inevitably somebody's going to transfer, somebody's going to get hurt, etc. And then the recruiting numbers will change. So first off, why did I mention Under Armour in Atlanta? What's going on with UCF there? In simple terms, UCF is still recruiting a lot of kids in Alabama and Georgia. There are even a few kids in other states that can come down. It could be Tennessee, it could be Mississippi, etc. You never know. UCF offered a kid that is right on the border of Louisiana the other day that's a running back, really good football player. Ran for 2,500 yards last year in Mississippi. And trust me, Mississippi per capita is about as good as it can be for high school football talent. With that being stated, Georgia's probably still the state to watch the most outside of the Sunshine State for the Knights. That state is loaded. It has quarterback play, which I will actually touch on in a moment. It has DBs. It has just about anything you can imagine that you would want. And it's really centralized in the greater Atlanta area. And then pretty much every county, north central, and south central Georgia, there's a couple of kids in every county that can play at a very high level. So UCF staff has recruited a lot of those areas in rural Georgia before. So that's not going to change either. So the objective here, going to talk a little bit about some of the kids that I know they're interested in, they could offer. I put a post up about this at Inside the Nights earlier today. Basically, I'll go over some of those kids, but again, this is a microcosm. You just don't know who's going to show up at one of these and do well. There's a couple of kids I'm like, who is that? They're really, really good football players. So to that end, I'm going to kind of go over some of that. But just note, more than anything else, that with the transfer portal, UCF's needs, they can come in and they can also go out. Gus Malzahn made that comment to us not all that long ago after the National Signing Day in February, and he is absolutely correct. So with that, the first position I want to talk about is quarterback. We'll just kind of go in order here. Malachi Singleton is UCF's main guy. And as I scan my list here, looking at some of the kids that I wrote about today at Inside the Nights, the Under Armour evaluations, he's one of the kids I didn't put in because I actually put him in an update earlier today. On the recruiting tracker, which is also at Inside the Nights, I just every kind of little tidbit that comes up, I've got one I've actually got to do here in a little bit because they offered another kid, Aidan Williams. But there's something really important about this. Malachi competed in absolutely horrific weather yesterday. When we got out there, it was cold. It was 40 degrees or so. It was raining. They moved the event indoors to the gym at Denmark High School. And they did so just for safety, for one. You can't really test in a gym the way you want. You can't run the 40 and stuff. It is what it is. The weather was horrific in Atlanta. The one day of the week, of course, at Under Armour it's terrible. And I was talking to some of my other guys that I know in the recruiting beat, 24/7, On 3, etc., rivals. We were all surprised at just how many kids showed up and still competed. Horrific weather. I mean, as cold as, get it. My feet were soaked. It was terrible. But even with umbrellas and all that, it didn't matter because the bottom line is these kids wanted to compete. I'll give the Georgia kids credit. And right in the middle of it, Malachi Singleton. Quarterbacks in particular, I did not expect to show up. Malachi was out there. He didn't start off necessarily red hot, but he did what he had to, especially during the one-on-one drills. He threw one of the best balls of the day, if not the best, on a back corner fade ball. Coverage was actually really good, and it was a touchdown. That's a really important factor if you can throw those kind of passes, because in today's world, teams are going to challenge you. They have not really any other choice because of how the rules favor offenses. They're going to come after you, play man coverage, and you got to be able to make those throws. To see him make it in cold weather, good sign. Excuse me. I think there's a pretty good chance from everything that I've heard from my intel that it's Arkansas, UCF, maybe Virginia, maybe a couple other schools. Michigan could get involved, but probably Arkansas or UCF for him. And Malachi is really just a great fit for either school in terms of the offense that they run. Now, decision time frame, no idea. I expect him to take visits. Part of it will probably transpire in the spring. Part of it will probably transpire early summer. When that culminates in his final decision, I don't know, because a few kids that are at other, situations with schools, meaning they have another kid higher on their board, things will change, kind of like with UCF. But Malachi is their guy. If they don't get him, they don't get him. That's part of football. You're going to miss on targets. He's about 6'1", 6'2", 225 pounds. Plays at North Cobb High School. He attended UCF's camp last year. North Cobb's just about 30 minutes or so, maybe 45 minutes from Atlanta, just north of the city. Really good football program. Key here, though, he's familiar with the program. He knows UCF's coaching staff. They are in the thick of the race, and he's a big-time guy. He has a Georgia offer, for those of you who don't know that much about him. And I think it's pretty safe to say if the national champs offer you, you're a good football player. So that's number one. Now, as far as the kids that UCF went after and they've offered or they're thinking about offering, that list is pretty unique. And what I mean by that is it's still changing. This early in the game, you're still getting film in. You're still getting transcripts in. You're still getting phone calls from guys that you may or may not have thought, hey, we got a shot. Running back is one of those spots where I find it pretty interesting because there aren't a lot of guys you need in a recruiting class at running back. One, maybe two. Jeremiah Cobb came to the camp. He has a bunch of offers. He's close, allegedly, to getting a Clemson offer. They're recruiting him. He's going there soon. He's got an Auburn offer. Does not have the Alabama offer. And he's from Catholic High School in Montgomery. That's an area that Gus Malzahn and his staff knows very well. They're trying to get him to come to campus, etc. He was dynamic. Just remember the name Jeremiah Cobb. He is definitely a player that UCF would like to get. That he was one of the top 3 running backs there in the drills. And there was a lot of running back talent. So that was impressive. I don't know for sure if and when he's going to visit UCF. I talked to him for a little bit. He was all over the place. He only knew like a little bit coming up in March. He's curious about Clemson, and a lot of kids are, because they're the least likely school in the country to offer a kid. They're really, really picky about who they offer, and they almost don't offer anybody unless they visit. That's just Dabo Swinney's style, and that's his choice. But I expect UCF to really try to get him on campus. I know they like him, and he fits the role of a slot receiver out of the backfield too. He's one of those guys you can motion out, and he can do things against linebackers and strong safeties that it's not going to be pretty. That's why I think he's a national recruit. And I think Clemson and Alabama and everybody will eventually offer at some point. Again, his name is Jeremiah Cobb, Catholic High School in Montgomery, Alabama. Moving to receiver, the kid that I think is probably going to blow up in Alabama, although he's still raw. He needs technical work because he's really only been committed to football since his sophomore year, and he's only played 2 years of committed football, is Davion Dozier out of Moody High School in Alabama. UCF's curious about him, and so are a lot of other schools. He has a handful of offers, but 6'4", $185, and can really run, long arms. This is a kid that I think is going to end up with UCF and a whole bunch of other schools offering him. He didn't look exactly refined by any means at Under Armour, but despite that, he's still making catches. Once he gets the technical aspects of his game taken care of, there's no reason to believe that Dozier will not have a ton of offers. Another kid that I really like, and I think is about as good as any receiver in the state of Florida now, and pretty much in the it's an incredible thing. Every year in Florida, there's a kid like this. And this year, his name is Keon Brown. I'm actually going to interview him and some of the other guys that were at the event here in about an hour. on my other podcast, the FGA Report, covering Florida, Georgia, Alabama. Keon plays at Rickards High School in Tallahassee. Now, that's just a random high school. Excuse me. And I don't know what it is about that area. Tallahassee just doesn't get the attention that it deserves for whatever reason. But he's 6'2", 190 pounds, maybe 6'3", and he's been clocked at over 21 miles per hour. He is very twitchy despite his length. John Garcia, my buddy from Sports Illustrated, put up a post. We were looking at film last night. Coming out of his breaks, he made multiple moves against a DB much smaller than him, kept him way off base, made an easy catch on a dig route across the middle. That kind of movement is what you see out of a kid that's 5'10", 5'8", 5'9", something like that. Again, Keon's at least 6'2". I interviewed him on Sunday. He's a tall kid. That's going to get you a lot of offers when you combine it with speed. He's just under 22 miles per hour. Human beings don't run that fast very often in high school. I don't, in general, really, but in high school especially. He's just learned speed training with some guys in the greater Tallahassee area. He's going to get even faster. I think he's going to turn into a national recruit. I know Florida State and some other schools have offered, but UCF and I expect a plethora of other institutions to offer him as well. I think that's going to be a really good get for whoever gets him, and he can play pretty early. He's got really good hands, too. I've seen him catch the ball with himself laying on his back, literally. Tight end, the guy that kind of stood out to me, and he's a flex kid, Jelani Thurman, plays at Langston Hughes High School on the south side of Atlanta. They were in the 6A state championship, came up 1 point short against Buford. He's probably 6'4" or so. 220, I would guess, give or take. Jelani's a great kid. I thought he was going to play outside linebacker D end. They've kind of moved him over to the offensive side, and that's his primary role now at Langston, and he played phenomenal yesterday at Under Armour. He was actually given the receiver award as the top guy there. And, I mean, I know he's going to end up being a flex kid. He's going to grow into it, but I was like, wow, this, to have those kind of skills and be looked at that way, that's impressive. Again, kind of like Davion Dozier, he's been committed to football, but this is a new position, like consistently for Jelani. I expect about everybody to offer him. He had quite a few to begin with, but now it's, especially after his film circulates and people hear podcasts like mine, etc., they're going to inquire. And he's a nice kid, good grades and all that kind of stuff. We'll take care of that as well. The only question with him is, what does he really want to play? Is it definitely the flex tight end? I assume it is, but he's such a good athlete, I would take him anyway. He had a one-handed catch in one-on-ones. He had a pass where he was going out of bounds, and he caught the ball down below his knees as he's dragging his feet. He has exceptional hands, so I like him a lot. O-line, the one kid, this is kind of funny, that I want to talk about. When I watched him walk in and then I kind of see him just kind of go through drills, wasn't overly necessarily impressed, but he's a kid that wants the pads, they're not necessarily on, but that mentality kicked in one-on-ones. He was really good. And I could see where some of the offers came from. And that is a kid by the name of Stanton Ramo. Stanton plays at one of the best programs in the state of Alabama, Thompson High School. And as a matter of fact, it's the best right now. It's just outside of Birmingham. They're winning state championships. They're pumping out guys going to college like Alabama or Auburn, wherever you may think. And above all else, what they're doing is the following. They're producing kids that are ready to play pretty early. This kid is massive. He's an offensive tackle. He's 300-plus pounds. He still needs to redefine his body, but he's a physical kid that could probably play right tackle. I know he played left in the event I was at yesterday for Under Armour Atlanta, but I think he could play guard in some situations as well. And most importantly, he's just a fearless guy. Like, he wants to put hands on and physically move somebody, even in pass pro. Now, part of that means your feet probably aren't moving the way they should, but that mentality is good. I know UCF and a lot of other schools will look at him. He's got some offers. The other kid that I was surprised at just how powerful he was. And after seeing his offer list, I wanted to go back and find his film, going through it. This is a kid that UCF and everybody's interested in. Again, Alabama has offered. That kind of speaks for itself. Wilkin Formby, one of the most massive kids I've seen this year. I'm going to guess he's 320, 330, somewhere in that area. He's probably 6'7", 6'8", and he plays at Northridge High School in the Tuscaloosa area. I would assume he's going to Alabama, but he's already got the offer. Why hasn't he committed? Usually if a kid is from that area and they get the offer, it's just over with or they're leaving. It's one of the two. He has the offer. He has not committed to Alabama. So maybe he's a kid that just wants to enjoy it and take visits, but I know UCF and the rest of the free world's going to inquire about him. He was very physical in both his reps and one-on-one. He threw a kid to the ground in pass pro twice in a row. That's a good sign. And he has a lot of upper body strength already naturally. Again, like most high school linemen, he needs to redevelop his body. But he was really good in the power play kinds of situations. So wanted to talk about him a little bit. Now, I kind of just went in order offensively, and I think I'll just break this down today for offense, and then I'm going to kind of go over some needs for UCF. Offensively, tomorrow I'll do the exact same thing, and I'll just do defense. It just makes sense to break it up that way. Offensively, quarterback, need one. Now, this can change. This can change. The quarterback situation this spring out of every position in college football, and this is not a UCF deal, this is any team, in a heartbeat can change. UCF is like anybody else. There's a whole hell of a lot of things that can go wrong, injuries, one kid transfers, two kid, whatever. Remember, the portal, you are immediately eligible. All these kids think they're going to just go somewhere and be the guy. Wrong, but that's what they think. So we'll see. Right now, they just need one. As I mentioned earlier, Malachi Singleton is probably the guy they want. That could change too, but I doubt that very much. They're pretty much entrenched in heading that direction. So running back. This is a little more difficult to project because they have a pretty good depth chart, but you want to at least get one a year. And they're recruiting some really, really good kids, like, Jeremiah Cobb, just as an example. There's really good players in the state of Florida, like Javen Simpkins, the kid from Miami. I'd take him at a heartbeat. There are just so many good players. I have no idea, but I wouldn't put it out of the realm if they would take two because I expect one, if not two, to transfer. The roster is very convoluted, and there's only one football. So keep that in the back burner of your mind. At least one. I could see two. The more I think about it, the more I think there's a chance there could be two, but I'm just projecting. Wide receiver. This is more the fun position for me than anything else. I'm just going to say three every year because you run an offense with three receivers. Until something changes, you sign three every year, you should be good. Now, the bonus with receivers is, in general, most of them can play another position, meaning safety, corner, possibly running back. That is a great situation because you can never have enough defensive backs, number one. Number two, attrition hits a spot on a team any given year. Look at UCF at defensive tackle last year. Things changed dramatically. You need bodies. So if they take a really good slot receiver, maybe they need corners in a year or two because of a rash of injuries. I wouldn't put out the idea that four is out of the question. Three is definitely what I would shoot for, but four is a possibility. The defensive backs, they're in good shape now, but again, spring ball's coming up. Anybody transfer, who gets hurt, who's academically ineligible, etc. So right now, I'm going to go three at the wide receiver position. But four, definitely a possibility. Tight end, this is the one that I think they need to do really well, and it's probably the most defined of any position on offense and possibly in recruiting in general for UCF. They need at least two, and they need two really good ones. I've been saying this for a long time. For Gus's offense to work efficiently, they need H-back / tight end / flex tight end, a bevy of versatile players. It's one of the high-maintenance positions they're going to recruit, and I say that in a positive way because, they just need really athletic guys, and they need the guys that are willing to block. When he was at Auburn, with or without Coach Lindsey, they used a lot of H-backs. What is an H-back? That's somebody that's kind of like a fullback. They're behind the offensive tackle or kind of offset diagonal to him, just behind him. And they'll do what they call wham blocks or let a D lineman come through and they'll hit him from the side, different things. It could be a little different guy to do that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying they're going to use a ton of that. I don't know what Coach Lindsey's going to do, but that's some of the things they've done before. under Gus at different spots that he's coached, Auburn being one of them. And those guys have done a lot of damage in the red zone catching passes too. So that's where the flex tight end part comes in. And sometimes it's just a big guy that catches the ball darn well after he blocks for 80% of the game. They forget about him. He slips out in the flat, catches the ball, and jogs into the end zone. I mean, literally just a bust. But you got to catch it. Those are the ones you can't let go. If you have an easy chance, you've got to make sure that it happens. So they only got one tight end in the high school ranks this past year. I thought they could have taken two, but they got Gamble. Or, he's only there for a year, but it's two tight ends, but he's probably just going to be here a year. Really athletic guy. They're going to be blessed to have him. And he's an NFL player, but it's just not the same. When I say two, I mean two high school kids. So I hope they get two this year, but if you can get another kid like him in the portal, that's an option as well. The last one is the one that I won't even guess how they'll break it down between the portal and high school. It's come as it is. You're going to want experience on the O-line. That's the position probably overall, not just the Knights, but I would say in college football in general, that high school kids are going to get the shaft the most because traditionally it is the position that takes the longest to develop from the time they sign until the time they end up actually contributing to that particular program. UCF, like anybody else, these guys are trying to stay on staff, not get fired. They want to win games. They want to do it now. Developing kids is great, but how many do you want to develop if you can take a kid from the portal? So generically, this is probably what you're going to hear me say for the next, Lord only knows how many years. I'm going to guess 2 and 2. 2 high school, 2 portal. That's what I think will end up having. But 4 overall is kind of the base number. They're going to lose some kids that are really good football players after the 2022 season along the offensive line. Can you get a kid like one of these guys like Ramil? I mean, I don't know. The state of Florida has a lot of really good kids. They want Roger Kearney, but so does the rest of the free world. UCF, part of the Under Armour thing, I should have said this earlier, they're going big. The kid that lives on the edge of Tuscaloosa or in the city limits, they would like to sign him, and other kids. I get it. Is it easy? No. The other part of that is just what I talked about with the O-line, the portal. If you have a relationship now, and Travis Williams, T. Will from UCF has talked about this. If you have a relationship and then things don't work out where that kid goes to school, he enters the portal. At least you have one established in round 2. That's flat out worked really well for UCF to date. Why would I think that it's not going to work in the future? So again, 2 plus 2. That's pretty much going to be my answer until otherwise proven moving forward. I think 3 is always going to be the lower end number. Maybe every third year you take 3, but you'd like to get 4 linemen a year. So UCF should be in pretty good shape if they do that. They got, some talent coming in, if you will, with the transfer portal this year. I mean, they really hit the home run, getting 2 tackles. That's great. I mean, they really did. And they got a high school kid that's going to be the backup center early on in Kittler. They're in good shape there, but that's a 3-man class. So you need 4 probably the next year. You want to have about 14 on your roster. 3 plus 4, do that 2 times, you're going to get 14. I hope they can get 3 high school kids and just be more of a development class. But if you get a chance to take 2 kids like they got this year, you're going to take the portal kids. So one last point about some of the kids that I saw at Under Armour, and this is just a generic thing. I interviewed kids that I knew were going to talk about UCF or at least mention them, or I knew they had an offer from UCF. And I also interviewed kids for other sites on Sports Illustrated, and we just kind of traded interviews and information, etc. A couple of generic things came about. Number one, there's a few hot schools right now in recruiting, both in the state of Florida. One is Florida. The Gators are really hot right now. And another one just below that is UCF. And these are kids that aren't from Florida. So that's pretty interesting. Like UCF is recruiting kids in Alabama. UCF is recruiting kids in Atlanta, and they know about UCF. The same thing with Florida. These staffs are putting in work. And it makes it interesting because I know if they're doing that, let's just use it as an example. In the state of Georgia, both Florida and UCF recruit that state hard. Can you imagine just how much fun it's going to be to talk about the recruiting wars between UCF and the Florida Gators in about 6 to 7 months once the next high school season starts and these kids start taking visits to games in the Bounce House or at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in the Swamp. So that's going to be fun. I just want to kind of mention that randomly some kids that, they may or may not end up being high on either school because they haven't visited them yet, etc. Just generically, some kids saying, in passing, Florida, I'll probably visit, or UCF, whatever. There's a few of those kids. And it's really interesting because new coaching staffs, you just don't know how it's going to go. And Florida staff's done pretty good this spring with the kids they want, but they're really selective. So a little bit different than Dan Mullen, who was not a very good recruiter. So with that, please hit the like and the subscribe button and also hit that notification button. Going to have a lot of fun this spring. We got spring practice coming up. Going to have Andrew and Steven on the show tomorrow. Going to talk a little bit about the ability to kind of forecast, if you will, some of the things regarding what UCF needs to do in spring ball. And I'm also going to do the second part of this podcast. So 2 tomorrow. Everybody have a great night. Thank you very much and take care.